Don't talk like you matter. You're just the help. The white man's voice rang out cold, sharp, and dripping with contempt, hitting her like a slap in the face. Emma stood less than 2 meters away, her silver tray tilting slightly as her right hand clenched. Across from her, the VIP table, three middle-aged men, a woman wearing sunglasses indoors, and one pair of eyes, full of suspicion. The guest had just shouted at Emma's coworker, a young brown-skinned waitress, over bringing the wrong wine. Emma couldn't just stand there. She didn't raise her voice. Just said one thing. Please don't speak to her like that. One sentence, but in this room, it landed like an accusation. Every eye turned. The soft jazz music melted into silence. Even the fork poised above a piece of foie gras paused midair. The manager appeared as if summoned by radar. Pencil skirt, crimson lipstick, eyes narrow like a paper cutter. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. Emma had dared to speak, and that was enough. Are you seriously confronting a guest? You're out of line. Without waiting for a response, she pulled a folded paper from her vest pocket. You've been warned before about insubordination. I won't tolerate drama in my dining room. The termination letter landed on the tray like an unwanted dessert. Emma said nothing. She didn't flare up. She didn't bow her head. She placed the tray on the nearest table, one not yet cleared, and stood still. The coworker beside her had retreated to the kitchen, shoulders trembling. No guest spoke. Only one woman in a red dress pretended to type on her phone under the table. Her fingers didn't move. The phone lay face down, but its camera light was on. Emma walked away. No glance back. No apology. No tears. Her shadow stretched across the marble floor, long and silent, leading to the exit. The termination letter still in hand, unfolded, one corner slightly curled from the sweat on her palm. Have you ever stayed silent? Because you thought no one would believe you, even when you were right. If this story speaks to you, leave a comment. I stood there too. And follow Unveiled Wealth, where every silence has its voice. As the glass door closed behind Emma, the phone on the table made a soft beep. The clip had just been saved. No one inside the restaurant knew. They had just become characters in a video the entire world would soon see. The next afternoon, an email slid into Emma's inbox without fanfare, marked application status declined. It was from the last of 3 restaurants she'd applied to, all under the same hospitality group where she had once been praised for her quiet professionalism. She had hoped that staying silent, not fighting back, not speaking to the press, not even commenting online might help her slip through unnoticed and start over. But just below the rejection notice, in smaller text and a colder font, it read internal flag disruptive behavior. Do not reconsider. No clarification. No appeal. Just a digital deadbolt. She sat on the edge of her bed, laptop dimly glowing in the late afternoon light, her knees pulled together, hands still resting on the keyboard like they didn't know what to do next. The ceiling fan above ticked slowly, its rhythmic creak the only sound in the room. Emma didn't cry, didn't shake, didn't speak. Instead, she began deleting things small, quiet things: her college transcript from when she studied communications, a recommendation letter from a professor who once called her the voice people trust, the first time off request she ever submitted to her old manager. With each file gone, something inside her folded further inward, like the edges of a note no one wanted to read anymore. She used to believe in the power of words. That saying the right thing at the right time could protect someone. That silence in the face of cruelty made you complicit. But now the silence she chose was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. A message popped up. Marcia, classmate, former friend. Girl, saw your name trending. You really couldn't just stay quiet. Followed by another. Hope it was worth it. Emma stared at the words for a long time, her thumb hovering, then muted the chat permanently. Not out of spite. Just preservation. In the tiny kitchen, the kettle had been boiling, forgotten. Steam curled toward the ceiling like something trying to leave the room. She never made the tea. Her hand was still on the laptop. The room still dark, her breath quiet, her body still. The laptop screen flickered against the wall, casting soft reflections behind her that looked almost like shadows moving away. And in that light, she sat not as someone angry or loud, not as a fighter or a rebel, but as a woman slowly vanishing from the system. One file, one folder, one memory at a time. That night, her phone lit up once, just once. No job offers, no apologies, no warmth, or fue que de reborn. Just a message from an unknown number. Sitting alone on the lock screen, blinking in silence like it had been waiting, I saw what really happened. The world needs to know. She stared at the message for almost a full minute before unlocking the screen. No name, no profile picture, no other text, just one line that felt more like a whisper than a warning. I saw what really happened. The world needs to know. For a split second, her lungs filled. The idea that someone else, anyone, had seen what she saw, had heard what she said, and still believed in her, hit like a gasp of air after being underwater too long. But then her thumb hovered. Something felt off. The number wasn't local. The contact history was blank. No previous messages. Just that one. Emma turned the phone face down. Walked to the sink. Let the water run until the steam fogged the mirror above. She didn't want to look at herself, not yet. Not now. She had already become a version of herself that she didn't recognize. That evening, she tried applying to 2 more jobs, a museum cafe and a hotel brunch spot, but the moment she typed her name into the online form, the autofill browser suggestion showed her resume. Then, just beneath it, the trending search Emma W. Rude waitress video. She closed the laptop. It wasn't just rejection. It was infection. Her name, her presence, had become something people avoided, something uncomfortable. Later that night, she reached out to one of her old coworkers, Tanya, the girl she defended. Her phone rang twice. Then voicemail. Emma didn't leave a message. She tried again the next morning. Texted just 5 words. Hope you're okay. I'm here. No reply. 3 hours passed. Then Tanya's name popped up, typing, then not typing, then gone. That silence hurt more than any headline. At noon, Emma checked her inbox. A new email had arrived, not from a restaurant, not from a recruiter, but from an address she didn't recognize. No subject line, no attachments. Just 2 words in the body, small and electric. Keep watching. The email sat open on her screen, the cursor blinking beneath 2 words, keep watching. No name, no signature, Miranas Money One. No context, but something about the tone, the timing, the stillness, made her stomach twist. She closed the laptop, stood up, and looked around her small studio apartment as if someone else might be watching from inside the walls. For the next few days, she stayed offline. No posts, no replies, no searches. But even silence can echo. One morning, while scrolling through a friend's story out of habit, she saw a reposted clip just 5 seconds long. Grainy, low resolution, but unmistakable. It was her, frozen mid-turn, just as she had spoken to the customer. But this time, the caption over the video read, "Waitress goes psycho on VIP guest fired on the spot." The video had no audio, no context, just shaky zoom-ins and red arrows pointing at her face. And it had over 90,000 views. Someone, maybe a customer, maybe staff, had recorded it from another angle, cut it, recaptioned it, and pushed it out like a tabloid headline. And now, her silence was being rewritten by strangers. She searched her own name. The auto-suggest filled in the blanks before she finished typing. Emma W. fired video. Emma W. meltdown. Emma W. blacklisted. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a recruiter. She picked up, her voice calm, controlled, hopeful. The woman on the other end spoke quickly. "Hi, Emma. Thanks for applying, but we've decided to move forward with other candidates." Then silence. But Emma didn't hang up. "I understand," she finally said. But the line had already gone dead. She didn't apply again that week. Instead, she opened her old notes from university lectures on narrative framing, crisis PR, social bias. She once believed that stories were shaped by who told them. But now, she was learning what it felt like to have hers stolen. At 2:14, I Hemiwaster. Friend, a new email appeared. No sender name, just a link. No message. Worcesterbarjum. She clicked once and saw herself in full color from across the room. Not the version she remembered. The one someone else had chosen to show. She didn't sleep after watching the video. Not because of what was shown, but because of what was missing. Her words had been cut, her tone edited out, her stillness framed as defiance. It wasn't what she did that haunted her. It was how quickly truth could be reshaped by pixels, cropped, uploaded, and believed. By sunrise, Emma had memorized the lighting in the frame, the slight shake of the camera, the echo of forks in the background, but none of it helped. The world was seeing a version of her she didn't recognize, and no matter how quiet she stayed, the noise kept growing. Her phone rang just after 9 Amiri and Timrit. She saw the name Mom and exhaled before answering. For a second, she thought maybe someone finally believed her. But the voice on the other end didn't ask how she was, didn't ask if she was okay. Her mother sounded careful, hesitant, like someone who just read too much and wasn't sure what parts to trust. Emma, she said slowly, why didn't you just let it go? People are saying things. Family's calling me. I don't know what you said to that guest, but they're saying you embarrassed the entire staff. Emma didn't interrupt. She just stared at the far wall, eyes unfocused, the phone resting against her cheek like it weighed 100 pounds. I raised you better than that, her mother added softly. We don't make scenes. Is sick on my son. And just like that, the call ended. No, are you okay? No, I'm proud of you. Just a quiet click and a colder silence. Emma stood in the center of the room. No job, no allies, no voice, and now no home to retreat to. She reached for her old journal in the drawer, flipping past pages filled with goals and speeches she never gave. And on one of the last pages, she'd once written a quote from her professor. The louder the lie, the quieter the truth becomes. She closed the book, stood still, and pressed the power button on her phone. But the screen didn't go black. A notification slid in just before shutdown. Anonymous user shared your video to 50K plus. Underneath, trending the girl who didn't flinch. It started as a low ripple, not a roar, just a 48-second clip posted anonymously to Reddit. No caption, no audio, no explanation. Just a shaky, zoomed-in frame of a dining room, a raised voice muted by distance, and one still figure caught in the middle. Emma, head slightly tilted, eyes locked forward, a barely visible shake in her fingers as she held the tray. A subtle step forward, then a pause, and finally in that soft, nearly imperceptible shake of the head. It wasn't a scream, it wasn't a protest, but it stopped people scrolling. Within hours, someone had pulled the clip, added a piano instrumental beneath it, and posted it to TikTok with the caption, "Sometimes silence is louder than rage." The video crossed 1 million views in under 24 hours. The top comment read, "She never yelled. And that's what screamed the loudest." Another replied, "Find her. She needs to be heard." More versions followed, some slowed the footage down. Others overlaid quotes about dignity and injustice. The image of Emma, frozen mid-breath, became a canvas for 100 different meanings. Blogs picked it up, then podcasts, then a small editorial headline on a popular news app. The girl who got fired without speaking. Emma saw it all. Her face on thumbnails. Her image pulled into reels, think pieces, even memes. A friend from university tagged her on Facebook. Emma, is this really you? She didn't reply. She didn't like, share, or comment. She didn't explain. She just watched as the world built a narrative without her, each share adding more weight to a story she hadn't chosen to tell. She wasn't sure if it terrified her, or if it was the first time she felt seen. That night, she turned on the TV, not looking for answers, just noise. But a familiar still image filled the screen. A national morning talk show host pointed at her paused face and said, "Tomorrow, we break it down frame by frame, and we've reached out to the woman in the clip." The next morning, she didn't plan to watch it, but curiosity is louder than fear, and silence isn't always still. The segment opened on a national morning show with smooth jazz, smiling anchors. And then her face, frozen mid-frame, projected behind them like an unsolved mystery. The host leaned forward, serious now, like they were analyzing something far more than a clip. One of them said, "We've received permission to air the viral video that sparked a national conversation on dignity, race, and workplace silence. We'll be slowing it down and walking through it moment by moment." Emma sat back, lips pressed tight. She hadn't given any permission. Not directly, not verbally. But when a moment escapes into the world, it doesn't ask for consent anymore. They played the footage again, slower this time, pointed to the moment the tray in her hand began to shake, froze on the frame where her eyes seemed to flicker with something between defiance and defeat. Zoomed in on the guest's body language. The anchor asked, was this courage or confrontation? Online, the comment sections caught fire. Some praised her restraint, others questioned her motive. This is what grace under pressure looks like. Maybe there's more to this than we're seeing. Or maybe she snapped, and now she's playing victim. Her name trended again this time, not just as a meme, but as a question. Emma W. Hero or hypocrite? And yet, through it all, she said nothing. She didn't correct, didn't confirm, didn't post a single word, because somewhere deep down, she felt it. The world wasn't waiting to hear her truth. They were waiting to own it. And maybe you felt that too when your silence was twisted before it was even understood. If you believe stories like Emma's matter, like this video, and follow Unveiled Wealth where quiet voices finally get heard. And then, right before cutting to commercial, host turned to camera and said, "We've reached out to the woman in the video. Her team says she's seen the footage, and she's watching now." The screen faded. Emma stared at the black TV. She hadn't hired a team. They opened with a freeze frame, not just of Emma's face, but of her stillness, the tilt of her head, the arc of her shoulder, the faint tension in her jaw like she was holding something back that didn't want to stay quiet. On the giant studio screen behind the host, her image looked both ordinary and mythic, like someone you'd pass on the street and someone you'd remember forever. The anchor turned to the audience, smiling politely, but her tone carried the sharp edge of theater. "Let's walk through this, frame by frame, and you tell us, what do you see?" They played the clip again, this time slower than before. Paused at the moment Emma looked at her coworker. Froze again when her lips parted, but no sound came. The anchor pointed at the guest's gesture, magnified and replayed the flick of her wrist, the narrowing of the eyes, the visible impatience. Is this tension? Is it threat? Is it something else? The studio audience didn't answer aloud, but you could feel their judgment hanging in the pause like air waiting to be inhaled. Online, the debate reignited instantly. Comments exploded across platforms. She was standing up for someone. You can see it. She crossed a line employees shouldn't talk back. This is why people don't speak up. Look what happens. Someone even created a slow-motion version with color filters, highlighting her eyes in blue and the guest's face in red, like this wasn't real life, but a trial by internet cinema. Emma watched from her apartment, arms crossed, volume low. She had muted every app. But somehow, she couldn't look away. It wasn't her voice on the screen, but it was her body, her silence, her breath. And then came the host's next line, perfectly timed between video cuts. Joining us now, a civil rights attorney who's reviewed the footage and has a few thoughts on what's really happening here. The screen shifted, and in her place now sat a man in a gray suit, sharp lines, clean glasses, voice measured like someone used to turning tension into testimony. A civil rights attorney, the host said. Someone who'd spent decades watching moments like this not on TV, but in courtrooms. He didn't speak right away, just watched the clip in silence. Twice, then looked into the camera, not smiling. "What you're seeing here," he began, "is not a meltdown. It's not rebellion. It's restraint. We talk a lot about freedom of speech, but what most people don't understand is how costly it can be when you actually use it, especially when you're not the one holding the checkbook." The studio quieted. He gestured to the frame on screen, paused on Emma's face. This is what indirect discrimination looks like. No slurs, no threats, Just the expectation that she remain invisible. Social media lit up again, half of it in applause, half already reaching for pitchforks. Some praised the analysis, others scoffed, always playing the race card. If she was white, would it still be restraint? This is why real conversations never happen. Then when a new guest joined via video, the restaurant's manager. Same red lipstick. Same tone as that night. But this time, calculated calm. Let me be clear, she said. That video doesn't show the full picture. There's no sound, no context. Anyone can edit a clip to look like a victim. She leaned forward, folded her hands. Emma wasn't fired for speaking. She was fired for disrupting a high-value guest experience. We have policies, and she knew them. The host asked if she'd seen the full footage, unedited. She hesitated. Just enough. Emma didn't move. Watching, processing, not just what was being said, but how quickly the same silence that made her visible was now being used to question if she ever mattered at all. Then, in a smaller window on the screen, a new video began to play, not from the guest phone, not from TikTok. It was security footage, high angle, time-stamped with audio missing. But this one had never aired before. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the host leaned in, eyes on the monitor. This, she said, was provided anonymously by someone claiming to work inside the restaurant's security team. It has not aired before. The clip opened with a high-angle view, grainier, colder. This wasn't a customer's phone. It was fixed, unmoving, watching from above like a silent witness that never blinked. Time-stamped. No music, no cuts. Emma stood exactly where she had been before, between two tables, one hand holding the tray, the other gently raised toward the guest. But now, from this angle, you could see what the other cameras never caught: the way her body moved forward. Not with threat, but with caution. A measured step, a pause. Her hand hovered, not clenched. Her lips moved once, then stopped. No sound, but enough to see she wasn't challenging. She was trying to interrupt softly, to intervene, not confront. And then, something else. The guest's face turned away, dismissive. But behind Emma, just barely in frame, was the other waitress, the one being shouted at. Her shoulders were shaking, not from rage, so from fear. And at the moment Emma stepped between them, her coworker raised a hand to her face and turned away. Not to leave, but to wipe away tears. No one had seen that. Not until now. The room went still. The audience didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They just watched. The host sat back, almost whispering now. No sound. No explanation. But sometimes, you don't need either. Emma stared at her screen, her own breath slowing. For the first time in weeks, the knot in her chest didn't loosen. But it shifted. Not into peace. Not into vindication. But into something new. Possibility. Back in the studio, the host looked into the camera. If you're watching, we'd still like to hear from you. Emma reached to close the laptop, but paused. For the first time, she didn't shut it. It took less than 12 hours after the security footage aired. A video resurfaced, shaky, old, filmed on a phone with poor lighting, but unmistakably inside the same restaurant. Not the same night, not the same people, but the same voice, same lipstick, same tone. The manager, snapping at another staff member this time, a young man. He stood frozen beside a table, tray in hand, mouth slightly open like he hadn't expected to be scolded in front of a full dining room. If you can't follow orders, you don't belong here, she barked. Don't embarrass me in front of guests. You're replaceable. The clip had been buried in someone's cloud folder for over a year, but now it was public. And it wasn't just the footage that struck people, it was the familiarity, the posture, the pacing, the volume patronymy. Different employee, same script. The person who posted it was a former line cook. Username, back of house truth. Their caption was simple. I didn't speak up back then, but I remember this moment like it was yesterday. Emma wasn't the first. She just refused to bow her head. The clip spread quickly. View counts stacked. Comments multiplied. Same manager. Same humiliation, different scapegoat. How many people has she done this to? This is what happens when no one watches the watchers. People began comparing the two clips side by side, pausing at the exact moment the manager raised her voice, mapping the rhythm of her words like it was choreography. And it was because it wasn't an outburst. It was habit. Emma didn't post anything, but somewhere, deep inside the network, the narrative had cracked. And through that crack, light was starting to leak in. That night, someone new posted under the trending hashtag, not an employee, not a cook, but a woman in a red dress. And she simply wrote, I was there that night. And I remember what really happened. The comment didn't go viral right away. It didn't need to. It landed like a soft breath in a room that had held its breath too long. I was there that night. And I remember what really happened. The username wasn't anonymous. It was real. Public. Verified to mirror. A personal account belonging to Madeline Carr, a known art consultant, often spotted at events, with a modest following but a strong reputation. And in her next post, she didn't just write, she spoke. In a dimly lit Instagram video, recorded in what looked like a quiet hotel room, Madeline faced the camera. Steady, poised. Her voice didn't shake, but something behind her eyes did. I wasn't planning to say anything. I didn't think it mattered. But I keep seeing this woman's face everywhere and nobody's telling it right. She paused, looking down once, then back up. I saw her step forward. Not to argue, not to cause a scene like they keep saying. She stepped forward because a man at our table was berating another waitress, and nobody said a thing. Except her. She said very calmly, Sir, please don't speak to her like that. One, that's it. She shrugged lightly. It wasn't defiance, it was dignity. And I'll be honest, I didn't say anything either. I froze. But she didn't. Within minutes, the clip spread like dry leaves under a match. News sites embedded it. Podcasts quoted it. Twitter dissected every syllable. For the first time, Emma had a witness, not a coworker, not a blurry camera, a guest, one, someone the world couldn't dismiss. Suddenly, the tide shifted again. The story wasn't just about policy or silence or race. It was about what people choose to see and what they choose to pretend isn't there. And this time, someone chose to see Emma. Within an hour, another message appeared. Not from a guest, but from someone deeper in the system. A private message leaked from a corporate inbox. That woman in red, she's the daughter of one of our largest investors. And she's asking for a meeting. At first, no one connected the dots. Madeline Carr, the woman in the red dress, was just another guest until someone noticed a name that had quietly sat on the company's annual report for over a decade. Charles F. Carr, investor, founding partner, silent shareholder in the restaurant group that now found itself in the crosshairs of a storm. And then came the internal leak, 2 sentences from an email buried in a chain between board members. She's asking to speak, and she's not coming as a guest this time. She's coming as family. The story twisted again. Madeline wasn't just a bystander. She was legacy. She had grown up at those tables, dined in those private lounges, watched her father shape the very service standards that Emma was now accused of violating. But she had her own memories. Sharia Warnyorn was a Kernenemi, and they weren't polished. In a follow-up post, this one more composed, she wrote, When I was 19, a manager in this very chain once called me decorative but disruptive because I asked why a waitress of color was serving 2 floors by herself. I didn't tell my father. I didn't tell anyone. I just swallowed it. But I never forgot. She went further. Emma reminded me of that day, not because she made noise, but because she didn't. And then she did something nobody expected. She sent a formal letter to the CEO, not a press statement, not a tweet, a letter signed, dated, and delivered. One line stood out. Emma Davis deserves better. And if we stand for the silence more than we stand for the truth, then this brand means nothing. That letter, within hours, made its way online. Not through not through the company. through staff who leaked it, like it was the first time someone with a name that mattered had said something that couldn't be ignored. And just like that, silence shifted again. This time from defense to demand. Emma hadn't said a word, but across her screen a notification appeared. Carr family requests public statement from corporate by end of day. For 42 days, her inbox filled. DMs stacked like snow on a windshield. People tagged her, debated her, impersonated her. And Emma said nothing. Not a like, not a repost, not a glance of validation. She let the world echo against itself. Let the noise climb its own walls and wait for her to answer a question she never asked. Until one afternoon, quiet, overcast, when a single post appeared on her page. No video, no selfie, no filter. Just text. Black letters on a white screen, centered like a whisper that didn't need a microphone. I spoke. No one heard, so silence had to be louder. There was no hashtag, no link water, no press release. But the post shattered everything. Within 10 minutes, it had 12,000 shares. In 30, it trended worldwide. Screenshots flooded the timeline. News anchors paused live segments to read it out loud. Talk shows replayed it like a sermon. For the first time, the headline wasn't about her silence, but her decision to use it as a language. That sentence became a wall quote, a protest banner, a pinned tweeter. It wasn't a scream, it was a verdict. And it didn't just validate her. It indicted everything that tried to erase her. The words were clipped, quiet, restrained, yet somehow it felt like she had stood in the middle of the restaurant all over again. Tray in hand, spine straight, voice steady. But this time, everyone was listening. Somewhere behind a boardroom door, someone panicked. Somewhere, a publicist wrote draft after draft. Somewhere, the mask of control slipped just enough to show what was behind it. And then corporate finally blinked. And maybe you've seen that moment too, when silence pushed harder than 1,000 words ever could. If this story moved you, share your voice with us. Comment "Silence isn't surrender," and follow Unveiled Wealth, where quiet truths speak the loudest. The restaurant group's official account posted its first direct statement in weeks. We are initiating a full investigation. And to Miss Emma Davis, we're sorry. In the weeks that followed her single sentence, the world came calling. 10 talk shows, 4 brand partnerships, a magazine cover with her silhouette already mocked up. 2 publishing houses sent outlines for books titled, after the lines she'd written, silence had to be louder. One company even offered to name a product after her. Emma declined all of them, not out of bitterness, not out of pride or meteor, but because something in her knew this wasn't a victory to cash in on. This wasn't a platform. It was a scar. And scars, while powerful, are not merchandise. The offers kept coming. A documentary pitch, a podcast series, a viral apparel line using her face in stencil. One email simply read, "You don't even need to say anything. Just show up." But that's what they'd missed. She'd already shown up once, and nobody listened. Now they wanted her silence only because it had become valuable, branded, marketable. But Emma didn't need a new stage. She needed air, quiet air. So when an indie filmmaker reached out, not with a contract, but with a Vimeo link titled "The Waitress Who Didn't Fight Back," Emma clicked. No dialogue, no narration, just moments. Real one's certain, unfiltered, distant. In one scene, a woman in uniform picks up a receipt from the floor. In another, she walks through a hallway no one sees, her back to the camera, her head never turning. Emma watched it twice, then closed the tab. That night, a YouTube reaction video went viral not from teenagers or influencers, but from a man in his 70s who'd been a server for 40 years. He watched the footage, paused it, leaned back, wiped his face, and said quietly, "I know that silence. I carried it for decades." Emma walked without destination, just distance. Side streets, bookstore windows, bus stops without benches. She let the city breathe around her without expectation, without direction. It was the first afternoon she didn't feel hunted by noise, only followed by echoes she no longer feared. She turned into the park near her old campus, not deliberately, just out of habit. The kind of place where seasons pass quietly and no one notices who's passing through. That's where she saw them, a group of high school students sitting cross-legged on the grass in a half circle, headphones still dangling around their necks, open laptops playing muted versions of her story. A teacher stood nearby, not lecturing, just guiding. "So tell me," he said, pointing toward the paused image of Emma on one of the screens, "do you think silence is an action or an absence?" The kids looked at each other, some shrugging, some frowning, all thinking harder than the question probably required. One girl finally raised her hand. "I think silence becomes action when no one's listening until you stop talking." Emma didn't smile. She didn't step closer. She just kept walking, head lowered, not in shame, but in quiet awe that the story had detached from her and found its own voice. It no longer needed her name to mean something. It was being discussed, dissected, defended, without her having to explain anything. That night, she opened her laptop not to post, not to browse, just to look at a blank screen that didn't expect a response. An unread email waited in the corner of her inbox. Subject line: full scholarship available, communication department, re-enrollment. The sender was someone she hadn't spoken to in 3 years, Professor Harlan, her former advisor. The body of the message: no pressure, no cameras, just a seat saved for when you're ready to finish what you started. Emma stared at the blinking cursor next to the reply button. She didn't type, but she didn't close the window either. The lecture hall hadn't changed. Same scratch marks on the desks, same buzzing lights, same poster in the hallway about ethics in media. But everything else had. This time, Emma didn't sit in the third row like she used to, taking notes in blue ink. She stood at the front. No podium. No, just her and a single frame frozen on the screen behind her. The still of her, turning her head mid-shift, lips parted but unheard. The room was full, not packed, but full in the way that mattered. Students leaning forward, some with notepads, others with phones half hidden on their laps, not to scroll but to record. Emma didn't introduce herself. She didn't need to. She let the image hang behind her for a moment longer before speaking. This clip went viral without sound, which means people projected onto it whatever they wanted to see. Some saw anger, some saw grace, some saw nothing at all. She looked up, steady. But what no one asked was what I saw. Silence again. This time not empty, but respectful. I didn't say anything that night because I didn't think it would be heard. Not by the guests, not by management, and not by anyone who was already convinced that my presence was the problem. But I still spoke, with how I stood, where I stepped, what I didn't do. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the rows. Silence is not the absence of meaning. Sometimes it's where the meaning is hiding. The screen behind her shifted. This time not a frozen frame, but the caption she'd written weeks ago, bold and still. I spoke. No one heard. So silence had to be louder. A few students nodded. One scribbled something down. Another wiped her eyes. Emma didn't perform. She didn't dramatize. She just shared. Near the back of the room, a student raised his hand. "Do you regret not speaking louder?" Emma let the question settle. Then, "No, none, warm." Because if I had yelled, they would have called it aggression. If I cried, they'd say it was weakness. But silence made them fill in the blanks, and for once, they had to do the work. As the students stood to leave, the professor approached her quietly. "Would you consider letting us make this case part of the curriculum?" Emma didn't answer right away. But for the first time, she nodded. Somewhere, in a mid-level HR office with glass doors and soundproof walls, a woman was packing a drawer. Not all at once, just one item at a time. A pen, a folder, a badge. The last was a nameplate, brushed silver, still bearing the title Regional Operations Manager. She didn't cry, but her jaw clenched in the way people do when their legacy begins to shrink inside a headline. Across the screen in a different part of the country, Emma's story had just been added to a university's curriculum, under a new module titled Communication Ethics in the Age of Viral Silence. Students were being assigned to analyze not just the clip, but the reaction to the clip. Who framed it? Who twisted it? Who stayed quiet until it was safe to speak? Emma wasn't quoted. She wasn't interviewed. Her presence didn't require explanation anymore. She had become the case, and the case had become the conversation. Meanwhile, news broke quietly, almost unceremoniously, that the restaurant group's VP of training had resigned. No fanfare, no press, just a note in a trade newsletter that said, "Following internal review, restructuring is underway." People understood what that meant. But Emma didn't share the headlines. She didn't repost the statements. She didn't add commentary when her former manager's LinkedIn went offline, or when anonymous employees began writing Medium essays titled, "We all knew, but no one wanted to go first." Instead, she sat at a cafe on a rainy afternoon, watching a girl barely 16 flip through a printed article that quoted her sentence in bold type. The girl looked confused, then intrigued. Then she took out a notebook and wrote something down beside the quote. Emma never saw what it was. She didn't need to. She finished her tea, tucked the chair in. The world had finally learned something she always knew. You don't have to raise your voice to raise the room's attention. You just have to hold your ground, long enough for silence to stop being a shield and start becoming a mirror. That night, Emma received one more email. Short, simple. Subject: we'd like to meet for a public apology. She didn't click it. Not yet. But this time, she didn't delete it either. The cafe wasn't crowded. It never was. One of those quiet corners of the city where people come more for the stillness than the coffee. Emma stepped in without hesitation. No sunglasses, no hat, no attempt to disappear. She didn't need to anymore. A young barista turned from the counter. She froze, then whispered, barely audible, "It's her." There was no music playing, just the quiet hum of steam and wooden chairs scraping softly across tile. One by one, customers turned. They didn't rush her. No one pulled out a phone. No one asked for a statement. They stood and they clapped. Not loudly, not like a show, but with a kind of quiet certainty. A thank you made of palms. A round of applause not for surviving, but for holding her ground while others questioned if she even had one to stand on. She didn't bow, didn't raise her hand, just walked to the counter, nodded once at the girl still holding the milk pitcher midair, and poured herself a cup from the self-serve station in the corner. Behind her, near the corkboard covered in handwritten poems and faded job flyers, hung a small frame quote. New, each said an oucher. Clean lettering, black ink. Silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. Emma saw it, but didn't stop. She knew those words weren't hers anymore. They belonged to everyone who needed them now. She sat by the window, alone but not isolated. A boy studying nearby glanced up, nudged his friend, and both smiled not in awe, but in recognition. She wasn't a celebrity. She was a signal that sometimes the ones who never shouted were the ones who'd been listening all along. Not everyone has a microphone, but that doesn't mean they don't have a voice. Have you ever lost something just for saying what was right? Your story might be the silence someone else is waiting to hear. Share it in the comments below. Because here at Unveiled Wealth, every silence tells a story.